would something which is permissible by Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ be a bad idea? Yes, there's many things that can be a bad idea, right? Because context makes a difference. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, for example, if you look at the hadiths on kuhul, on iktihal, there are numerous hadiths on kuhul. But the ulama differed on its application. Some said that it is only, some of the ulama said this is only before going to sleep. Not during the day, because iktihal, applying kuhul, is a type of adornment. And men don't adorn themselves. Men don't adorn themselves. Others said, no, it's from the sunnahs of habits, but kuhul is only to be used when it is fitting the person's medical temperament. And certain types of things aren't good for everybody. Should you eat dates? Depends on your health circumstances. Right? Depends on your health circumstances, right? So not everything that is allowed in the sunnah is sunnah. Right? Because yes, it's in itself allowed, but in its application, you have to consider circumstances. For example, if you go to your in-laws and they're sitting at the dining table, they say, no, I want to sit on the ground because it's sunnah. It may be haram for you to do that sunnah. Why? Because doing so, you're expressing disrespect to your host. They're sitting on the dining table, you take your plate, sit on the ground, and look up at them. It is disrespecting your host and also making yourself look foolish. And it's also a cause of disrespect for the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So the application of prophetic teachings requires consideration of context. And that requires knowledge. There's many examples of that. In Damascus, one of the very distinguished scholars, Shaykh Rushdi al-Qalam, took me aside and asked me to tell one of the Canadian brothers, because he's wearing his thobe high. And the sunnah is to wear the thobe at shin level. In the saq. And he said, could you explain to the brother? And the brother knows Arabic, that you shouldn't do that because it looks like the dress of the people of innovation. And it's against the social norms of the people of Sham. I said, could you explain it to him? He said, I'm afraid he won't listen to me. I said, well, I'm afraid he won't listen to me either. So he explained it out to me. Right? So I said, let's turn into a question. You ask me about it, and I'll give an explanation. Maybe he'll hear it. So as we're walking, I asked him, Sayyidi, what if I started wearing my thobe? Right? Because in itself, yes, that's from the sunnah. But in its application, you have to look at circumstances. There's numerous examples related to that. One of the great Hanbali scholars, Ibn Badran, who was the mufti of the Hanbalis of Duma a century ago, one of the greatest of the late Hanbalis, he was asked about, quote unquote, men wearing Islamic clothing if they're in Europe. Of course, this is a very different, this is like late 19th century, early 20th century, and there's very few Muslims there. And he said that if this would cause them to be looked down upon in society, it may be impermissible. Because the Prophet ﷺ told us not to, naha an libas al-shuhra, to wear that which will cause us to be singled out negatively and cause us to be unreasonably looked down upon. And that, of course, depends on context. In other situations, right? In other situations, so how one applies prophetic teaching depends on context, right? And there's a difference between should a scholar or a person of knowledge wear religious garb in a minority context vis-a-vis someone else. But those kinds of application, well, just because something was done in the sunnah does not mean we just do that thing, right? Because the sunnah has values, it has a form, but it also has an implementation. And that's why we need knowledge. Right? And there's many, many examples of that. So something like that, second marriage, in anything you have to consider the intention, the action itself, and its likely consequences. Any action where you don't consider why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and to what end is not an Islamic decision. It's not an Islamic decision. In many circumstances, haram to command the good and forbid the wrong, if it'll cause greater harm. What you're saying is correct, but you have to consider consequences.
لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله